President Trump says that he's headed to Kenosha, Wisconsin today, despite pleas from local government officials to avoid the area. Both the city's mayor and the state's governor, they're worried that the president's visit could further fuel tensions following more than a week of violent protests at times. The widespread demonstrations first started only hours after police shot Jacob Blake multiple times in the back. According to his family attorneys, the 29-year-old black father of 6 is now paralyzed. His family is expected to speak to reporters around the same time that the president arrives in Kenosha. So Ben Tracy is following the very latest from the White House and is joining us now. Ben, you know, there's no doubt that this community, Kenosha, needs words of healing, needs to come together, words that will bring the temperature down, if you will. And up until now, we've been hearing from local officials there. We've been hearing from, you know, the victim's family, and they're already going through a lot. For them to sort of appeal for people to take it down a bit is a lot to ask. How is the president going to add to this conversation? What does the president say he wants to accomplish when he goes to Kenosha?
It's not entirely clear yet. You know, those protests really have calmed down in the last couple of days, and the concern from the local officials there is that the president's visit will actually raise those tensions again. The president says that he's going there to meet with law enforcement to thank them for the job that they have done, that he also wants to survey some of the damage. But given the rhetoric that we've heard from the president in recent days and weeks about law and order, you can kind of assume what you're going to hear from the president if he does give remarks or answers questions on the ground there. And there is some concern that perhaps that would reignite some of these protests in opposition to him and to what he's been saying. Right now there is no meeting scheduled between the president and the Blake family. A lawyer for the family says that President Trump actually refused to talk to the family on the phone if their lawyer was also going to be on the call. That person says that Jacob Blake's mother would have asked the president to watch the video of the shooting and to do what she says she's asked all Americans to do, which is to examine their heart.
You know, you talked about some of the rhetoric that we've heard from the president. I want to play a little bit of what he had to say when he was asked about the white teenager who is now facing homicide charges for allegedly shooting and killing 2 people during protests in Kenosha. This is what the president had to say.
And it was something that we're looking at right now, and it's under investigation. But I guess he was in very big trouble. He would have been. He probably would have been killed. But it's under investigation.
Do you think private citizens should be taking guns?
I'd like to see law enforcement take care of everything.
You know, this is the law and order president. He doesn't miss an opportunity to remind us of that. But his condemnation of all forms of violence has been slow to come. And I'm trying to figure out the strategy here. He almost appeared, you know, in that press conference to kind of be making excuses for Rittenhouse's behavior, suggesting that perhaps he was threatened, and so he was sort of fighting back. And I think he says he almost might have been killed in the situation. What is the messaging here coming from the president?
Well, it's certainly not consistent. I mean, you are right that the president has definitely positioned himself as the candidate of law and order. He has demanded that Joe Biden come out and condemn violence on all sides, which is something Joe Biden actually did do yesterday. But the president himself often refuses to criticize anyone that is viewed as a supporter of his, no matter what action they take. I asked the White House press secretary yesterday, I said, does the president condemn the actions of Kyle Rittenhouse? And she said the president's not going to weigh in on this. Well, then later in the day, the president was asked again at that briefing. He did weigh in on it, but he couldn't even find it in himself to condemn somebody who is now charged with 5 felonies and accused of murdering 2 people in Kenosha. So the president, you know, and adding to that, the president was also asked about some of his supporters in Portland who rode in on that caravan and were seen on video, you know, shooting people with paintballs, which is a video that the president himself tweeted out on Sunday. He did not condemn that either. He said that they were patriotic and peaceful. So certainly the president does seem to want to have this both ways, both condemn the violence, say that he's the candidate of law and order, but if it appears to be coming from somebody who supports him, there is much more leniency.
Yeah, and you point out that he sort of has consistently blamed Democrats for the violence in their cities or in their states, that he has called on Joe Biden to condemn the violence, which you point out Joe Biden has done that. But then, some of those supporters of the president criticized Biden for not specifically naming Antifa in his condemnation of violence. I'm just wondering, how does this play into the president's sort of broader strategy? Because, we always have to look to his reelection quest.
Yeah, and the president really is going to use this as his message for the home stretch of this campaign, because one of the benefits to this is that this really takes the attention and the focus off of coronavirus. And a lot of polls show that voters don't appreciate or don't support how the president has responded to the virus. So talking about law and order, focusing on these protests and some of the riots and looting that have happened in American cities, that's much more in the president's lane in terms of something that he's comfortable wading into. So I would expect to see more of that. But you mentioned, yesterday the response to Joe Biden's speech from the Trump campaign was, well, he didn't mention Antifa. I don't think there's ever going to be anything Joe Biden's going to say that's going to fully be enough. There's always going to be something that the Trump campaign will say that he's not saying. But I think what Joe Biden signaled yesterday is that he's not going to take this lying down, that he's not going to allow President Trump to paint him as this puppet of the radical left, which Joe Biden clearly does not see himself as being.
All right, let's pivot over to something else. The coronavirus pandemic. The U.S. sadly has passed 6 million confirmed cases yesterday. That's about 2 million more than Brazil. Brazil is in second place for this grim statistic. The FDA Commissioner, Stephen Hahn, he actually spoke on CBS News about timing for a potential vaccine and questions over political influence, because it appeared in an interview that he did, I believe, with the Financial Times, that he was suggesting that if a vaccine looked like it would do more good than harm, that he would be willing to fast track it even before the phase 3 test results were in. What did he say about this concern about political influence?
So he pretty directly answered the question that Dr. LaPook asked him. I think Dr. LaPook's exact question was, have you felt political pressure to release a vaccine before it's ready? And Dr. Hahn pretty categorically said no, that he does not feel political pressure to do that, and that he would only approve a vaccine once he feels it is safe. However, what you were referencing there, he did kind of carve out space for using what's called an emergency use authorization to approve a vaccine before all those trials would be done. Now, that would be fairly extraordinary, when it comes to something like a vaccine. This is not a therapeutic where it's just if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. This could actually make people sick if it doesn't work. But Dr. Hahn has been pretty clear, saying that he would need to see very promising results from those trials, that both the vaccine is effective and also safe, before he would consider that EUA. Where this is all coming from, of course, is a lot of people speculating that President Trump is putting pressure on him to get a vaccine approved before the election, seen as something that could help President Trump's re-election prospects. The president himself has been very vocal, saying that he'd love to see one by Election Day, and predicting with some regularity now that there will actually be a vaccine by the end of the year, which we are not really hearing from the FDA or the other doctors involved.
Yeah, Ben, I think it's really good that you sort of differentiate between, something that would be a treatment versus a vaccine. With the treatment, people are already sick, and so perhaps doctors are willing to take some risks, calculated risks, to get someone through this illness. We're talking about a vaccine where the idea is to give it to people who are already completely healthy, and so you certainly don't want to do more damage than good. And this kind of flip-flopping, this conversation, it only contributes to people feeling more insecure about the prospect of a vaccine that we already know is being fast-tracked as it is. But I know, Ben, we're going to talk more about this in the coming days. Thank you so much.
Thank you.